So when Culturevist was first created, the spirit behind it, the need was that I would chat to people about culture, like what happened at work and an idea I had, and people would listen to me like up to a point, but I wanted to discover other people who were properly into culture that I could like go deep with. And when I first discovered you, the leading phrase was obsessed with organizational culture, and I thought, yes, this is someone who like is exactly why this community is created, for an opportunity for us to share and learn from each other. So when we started this show, you were on the list of must-have guests. So I'm thrilled that you said yes. If you'd like to introduce yourself for watchers.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Matt. So I'm Hannah Pinnock, and I'm a design strategist at an agency called Methods, and we principally work in the public sector, mainly in central government, doing digital transformation. And
could you share your journey that's led you to your work in influencing company culture?
Yeah, so I don't work, my job is not in culture at all. So I'm a consultant, and I try and kind of weave that into my work as much as possible, but principally like I'm not employed to do culture stuff. But I was working at an agency called Us Creates about 5 or 6 years ago, and we were mainly operating in the health and wellbeing space across, public, private, and third sectors. And we worked really hard as a team. We spent a lot of time at work. Hours were long, and we were kind of okay with that. Like that was something that we were okay doing. But as time went on, work sort of started to bleed into the rest of life. So work started when I woke up in the morning and I would check my phone and check my email. And that probably sounds quite familiar to a lot of people, but it is definitely quite unhealthy. And, work would start at 5 p.m. on a Sunday evening, and it wasn't just one person, it was like multiple people across the company doing work at that time. And so we started thinking, and I started thinking about this stuff with my colleague at the time, who's a lovely lady called Fran Cook. And the two of us came up with this concept of, because we were called Us Creates, of the Us project. And so it was all about kind of thinking internally, like how can we improve our health and well-being? And it really became a culture project. It was kind of framed as a well-being thing. And so one of the main things that we wanted to introduce, or trial at least, was an email ban. So between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., we were banned from sending emails to each other. Clients could send emails to us, but to each other and beyond, we were not allowed to do that. And so we floated the idea, we trialed it with a team, and it was like an overwhelming success. Overnight, behavior just changed immediately. And some of the work...
Literally overnight.
Literally overnight. And so some of the work we were doing at Us Creates was in the behavior change space. And so we kind of started looking at like why this was so effective and how we could apply it to other areas. And so there were a bunch of other changes that we brought in. Like we started getting a fruit box delivered every week. We managed to twist the founder's arms and get a NutriBullet. And there was a bunch of other stuff kind of related to kind of diet and exercise. We had a tennis club for a while. We had a running club for a while. And we were only a small team of like 20 people. But it just became such a lovely culture to work in. And so then because of that experience and how I'd sort of been able to affect that change at such a, I was working in operations at the time. Like I wasn't one of the directors of the company. I didn't have a culture role. I didn't even have a people role. But I started observing the culture of our clients. And so I'd go into these projects and we were doing, digital transformation projects or behavior change or service design, something like that. And I could just see how the culture of these organizations was limiting them in some way, or it was leading to the problem that they perceived, or it was kind of compounding a problem that they had. And so I just, just through stealth started to like observe how this kind of culture was manifesting and being shaped. So that's how, really.
So three of the things that stood out to me from that are, I imagine some people watching this may think, oh, it's like banning email 7 till 7 is really restrictive and it's not very empowering, because you're kind of putting a rule in place. It's quite a polarizing topic. And I've found that actually sometimes in order to have flexibility, you need the rules. An example I gave previously was, in order to give people time to have flexibility at lunchtime, you need to set a rule to say, don't invite people to meetings at lunchtime. So that's an example that I've seen. Another one was, you mentioned how like things changed overnight. It's something I hear so often is culture doesn't change overnight. And it kind of depends what people mean when they say culture doesn't change overnight. In some aspects, some behaviors, some rituals might not change overnight. But actually, I've experienced many examples similar to like this one, where you could actually, maybe there's a new rule where you say, okay, no longer do you need to get sign off by a vice president or a head of department. We're going to decentralize that and give people authority closer. That change can have immediate effect. And depending on your definition of culture can change immediately as a result. I think with the pandemic as well, like culture in many companies changed in a moment. And then the last thing, the last thing was, see, immediately, just from a few sentences, it sparks me off, about how culture was some of the reason for some of the challenges or problems that people saw. I see that in that I see people may often say, oh, this is the problem. Like the problem is people aren't speaking up. But in many cases, the problem that people perceive or see is actually a symptom of a deeper thing. So I've definitely seen some of the examples that you mentioned.
Yeah. And that example there is possibly linked to psychological safety. People, I have seen in some organizations, people who don't ever speak up. They just don't engage in kind of the organizational like chatter. And I kind of wonder why that is. And then you see how maybe someone is treated who does speak up and does kind of maybe share something that's maybe not mainstream, and actually you can see, okay, that's why all those people who don't feel like they have strong voices or who don't fit the I guess our kind of understanding of privilege and power, the women, the people of color, the people with disabilities, like that's why they're not speaking up, because of how they might, or they perceive they may be treated. And so psychological safety for me is like one of the most important like facets of a high performing team. And I think for me, I'm so interested in culture, and I'm so passionate about it because I think culture leads to high performing teams. Like having a great culture is a differential between the kind of good companies and the great companies. Having a really powerful, strong culture that is, allows people to kind of thrive and kind of fulfill their personal and professional goals. You look at Google, for example, that kind of culture. Yeah.
I'd love to do a session on companies that are seen by various metrics as actually doing really well, but having some people would say is not a great culture, and that's very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many companies that are seen, or you hear about these stories where you're like, what are you doing? But actually, on certain metrics, they are performing well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends what you measure, right? And people say like culture is really hard to measure, and it is, but you can measure what your turnover is or what your churn is in staff. You can measure, like, of the people that are leaving your company, what kind of demographic do they fit? You know, you can measure some things that will give you some indication of your culture, like how many, what kind of people are going for promotion, what kind of people are you getting apply for those senior leadership roles. Yeah,
that would be really fun to put together. Showing myself really fun. Probably for me it'd be fun. Yeah, like we could create a list of just examples of different types of metrics that wouldn't be such typical ones, but then could influence behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm getting ideas already.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. Like, this is my type of fun.
So one of the things we discussed is looking at a grassroots approach to affecting change. So could you share a bit about your experience in that?
Yeah. So obviously that experience that Us creates gave me a real taste for how can I, like, what levers can I pull? How can I, like, create change here? And I suppose once you get a bit of a taste for it, you want more. You want to be able to kind of fix all the things you can see. And that company was, the culture was inherently kind of, we were always iterating, we were always learning, we were always stretching ourselves, pushing ourselves to be better for our clients, to deliver better work. And that can be a really fulfilling environment to work in, but it's also quite exhausting because you're constantly changing, and sometimes you need to just kind of, okay, now we're here and we're going to stay there. So I think for me, if you don't have a culture role, which I don't, and I never have done, but you are passionate about culture and you see, opportunities or challenges that you wanna fix, you can do that through controlling or influencing your sphere of influence. You've got your sphere of control, which is you, and then you've got your sphere of influence, which is like your kind of immediate friends and family, your colleagues, maybe some people in your community, people that you can influence. You can't control them, but you can influence their behavior and their approach. And then you've got outside of that your kind of the sphere that's outside of your influence or control, and that could be like your, if you're in a big organization, your chief exec, or your politicians, or your wider kind of social groups. So for me, recognizing that you can't change the world, but you can influence your corner of it is really important. And so my approach is always just the kind of challenges that you can see at a local level, like those are the ones that you should try and fix initially. But there's lots of challenges with that. The leadership structure and the characters in your leadership team will be hugely influential, or could be hugely influential. Those are powerful forces that shape your org culture, and sometimes you can influence them and sometimes you can't. And sometimes it's about knowing how to influence them and what route to go, and who to speak to first to get some like backing to your idea, and then the next steps beyond that you can take forward. What else is there? There's things like your organizational structure. So you may be able to influence your team quite significantly, but you may not be able to have any influence on the teams over here. Organizational readiness as well. Like, how much do they want to change? Have they just been through a load of change? Are they experiencing change fatigue? I think that the things that you want to change should be quite small. So if you want to have an impact, like start small and see what happens, because no one's going to fire you for like championing putting salary bands on job adverts. Or they certainly shouldn't do. If they do, you're probably in the wrong company. But that's something I did recently at Methods, actually, is I'm quite, passionate that salary bands on job adverts are quite an important way of bringing in a more diverse crowd to job applicants. And so this was something that I had a chat with my boss about, and I said, this is a really easy, tiny thing. Like, there's no reason for us not to be doing this. Why can't we just do it? And there was a bit of back and forth with HR, but eventually we were able to do it. And like, that's such a small thing, but that might have quite a significant impact if you think, if you look kind of down the road in a year's time or 5 years' time at how much more diverse the team is as a result of those salary bands. And also the fact that, the people that are less likely to negotiate have managed to get into those roles on better salaries. That's always a win, right?
And no, it's such a powerful one that, and also once people are there, knowing that like there's a level of transparency, and that level of transparency may depend on the company, but so in some companies, people know how much other colleagues earn exactly. In some, even more extreme, some companies have their salaries, well, I say even more extreme, I guess depending on the role, it's extreme. So for some roles, it's quite common for external people to know the salary, whereas for other roles, it's not so common. So there's this spectrum of some companies, they share it externally, the actual salaries, some internally, and then through that spectrum where it could create like dysfunction, lack of trust, and like resentment if people have either an accurate or inaccurate perception of what other people are earning. I guess one of the challenges, not a reason not to do it, but one of the challenges is if a company if their starting point is where there has been a lack of equality and fairness and transparency, then it'll be harder work. But I think the point is, well, if you have certain aspirations, then you need to put in the work to achieve them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. I think that's pretty much sums it up. I think that's a really good point.
Another thing that you said about so like you, I haven't worked in an HR role. I haven't worked in a formal role a role with formal responsibility and authority over culture. However, I've done so much to influence it and learned so much. So some of the things I found in my experience is, so if I have a view, I can try and, as you say, like influence I call it like the bubble around me. So I might be able to influence my peers. And if they're in other teams, that might influence other parts of the company. Then you might hit a boundary. So that boundary might be, you could do stuff within a team, but unless you've got the manager's kind of authority or the manager's authority to do something, then that change might be pretty much local to the team and not have that much impact. So an example would be, okay, if we want to change the procurement process, so who we procure and get services from, how we get the services, what they are, the diversity of the suppliers that we use, and so on. My aspirations might hit a formal process like the system. So it might be a policy, it might be an existing contract, it might be someone's incentivized like by a bonus to not change it. So my change might hit a systemic organizational boundary. A couple of the ways that I found a couple of the approaches I've taken are, one is win the people, and it's kind of pretty well known one. But the power of community, if people share your vision or your values, the more and more people that speak up, the more pressure that can add to that system.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I did is I had an idea for something, and I, rather than like say the idea and like tell people the idea, I wanted to show them.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, who are the people with the power? Who are they influenced by? And the people they were influenced by in some ways are people outside the company, or like clients or customers. So I had built relationships and like shared a really like half-formed idea with them, and it was safe for me to do so. But I said, like, if we did this, would you be in? And once they said yeah, then I could show that we already had their support, and that helped influence something in a way that I didn't have formal authority to do.
Yeah, so you were influencing the sphere of influence of that stakeholder, of that person. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I was
maybe
like, go on.
No, I was just going to say maybe your sphere of influence and their sphere of influence like overlapped, and you were able to like leverage that overlap.
Exactly. Like one of the things I think is a great activity for new joiners in a company is for people who are already there to map where they think like the flows of influence and power are. It can be quite tough to do. You need a certain trust to do it, but it'd be super interesting, I think, to do. So you'd map, okay, where's your influence? Who have you got influences with, either in your team, outside your company, and then the people you're trying to influence who are theirs. There's probably, I don't know if there's some tool that does that mapping, but it's then you kind of work with the energy rather than like fighting it.
Yeah, 100%. But it's interesting because, like, say we work in the same organization, my perceived influence or power will maybe be different to how you perceive my influence or power. And so it's a very personal thing. And I think if you sat down 100 people in an organization to map that stuff, there would be some very kind of strong, I guess, like similarities, synergy. And then there would be like other completely, perceptions that are completely off from one person to another. So it's interesting. It would be a really interesting exercise to do. I'd love to do that with a client one day. But yeah, I mean, as you say, it's getting the voice of the people to kind of back you up. But also, I think it's really important to show the impact. So trial something and start small, and baseline, always get your data. And then once you've done that, and you can say like, okay, we know that you don't want to do this thing, but like look at the kind of the positivity that's come out of this. Look at the benefits. The team are more connected. They've come up with these great ideas. So I mentioned Google before. Google, I think I might be wrong, but I think they used to give a day a week to people's pet projects. And so I think Google Glass was one of the outputs to that from that time. What ended up happening though, and why they stopped it, was people used to use that time for their like own projects. So they'd be like developing their side hustle on Google's time. But the principle of giving that time and space for innovation and collaboration and learning and development is transferable to my world, where we have communities of practice, and giving that time each week or each fortnight, that's protected time where you come together to collaborate as a team. And that is when you learn from each other. That's when you push ahead your practice. That's when you get to do that innovation, and then you reach into new markets. And so like one example of this, which is maybe an example of grassroots culture change, I set up a community of practice at Methods called Culture Club. So if anyone tries to shut it down, I'm just going to sing at them like, do you really want to hurt me? But it's basically for the 5 people that I've come across in the company who are, like you and I, obsessed with culture. And it was like, well, we all share this in common. We are all really interested in this. Culture is not an offering that we have for our clients at the moment, but could it be? And so the whole purpose of Culture Club is to understand our own culture and maybe what our target culture could or should be. We're going through a bit of a change at the moment, so there's an opportunity there. But also, what could our culture offering be to our clients? Here we are, there's 5 of us, we've all got varied experience in this space. How can we apply that and win some work in it? And then, I was talking to a colleague of mine today about this stuff, and he said, the moment you start doing culture work, you access the top layer of an organization. You literally get in the door with the CEO. And so that then opens the door to other types of work, which is really exciting. And actually, the potential there for me to be able to do digital transformation, but also to be kind of affecting culture at an organizational level for our clients is really exciting. And watch this space, I suppose. In a year's time, I'll put a blog out about it.
Yeah, we'll have you back when you're the VP of culture offering. Yeah. I think I'm so with you. Like, opening those doors enables a different type of conversation potentially. And what's great is, like, it could serve different metrics. So it might serve opening up different commercial metrics. It might also open up, okay, we could have more impact through different type of work and have different impact on more colleagues and more of the people we serve externally. I'm conscious, like, we could talk for hours. So let's go with last question, which would be, so if someone who watches this wants to influence their company's culture, what advice would you offer them?
I think the main one has to be to use your voice. If you see something that you don't like, you're not happy with, anyone can moan to their colleagues in the kitchen about that thing that they've seen, but use your voice, observe and talk to someone who is at the right level, who you think can, maybe support a change. And don't be afraid to keep flagging stuff, because leaders, I think, get bogged down with their, with running a company. Like, culture is something that often falls into the backseat, or out of the boot even, and it's just something that's not given the priority it should have. But I think if you keep it on at the top of the agenda for the kind of movers and shakers in your company, and keep reminding them that this thing is important to you, and that you're still waiting for something to change, or come with suggestions and change it yourself. But yeah, use your voice, speak up. People want to hear what you've got to say.
I feel really fortunate that you have chosen to use your voice. It means so much that you've learned and you've experienced a lot on your journey, and by sharing it with the community, passing it on means so much. So thanks so much for being on the show, Hannah.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Okay. Viewers, we'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.